All right, welcome back to another episode of Blown Coverage. Week 11 is in the books. And I say, Caleb, we just go ahead and get right into it. It was a very kind of interesting week of college football. It seemed like to me uh, it was mostly about the 11 o'clock window, 2:30 window, 6:30 was a little bit boring. I'll get your thoughts on that, I guess. But I kind of say we just go ahead and start and get into the games. And let's just start with the game of the day, and that is number two Indiana and Penn State. Really looked like Penn State was going to pull this one out. I was wondering, tell me what you think of this. If Penn State wins, do they rush the field?
Probably.
Think so? It's kind of a weird thing to think about because I was thinking, well, are they really going to rush the field after their season's kind of been somewhat of a failure? But I was thinking, they don't beat top five opponents. That's kind of been the whole thing
Yeah,
on.
yeah, right.
And then the moment Franklin's gone, I think this was their
Yeah,
first
dude.
home game since James Franklin being fired. And
Wouldn't
then
that have been pretty
does this
hilarious?
make James Franklin look worse in your eyes, or does it matter?
No, I don't think it matters just because, I mean, throughout his entire time there, it's not like he could not make them competitive against these types of teams. It was just they couldn't win. And that's exactly what happened today. So, but I think they probably would have rushed just because it's kind of like I wouldn't say like a really desperate time for Penn State, but for the season's sake, then yes, it is kind of a desperate time because it's like, what are we going to do from here on out? I guess. And I mean, they definitely played a really good game against Indiana, who up to this point, aside from the Iowa game, they've just been blowing people out. So you got to give Penn State a lot of credit. Um, and the coaches have a good game plan. So, but I think you got to give Indiana credit too for fighting because people have kind of written Penn State off as like a crappy team, and they have like if they could just put it all together, I think they can go and compete with pretty much almost anybody. I guess you could say on any given day. Uh, Consistently, I'm not really sure, but anyway, Penn State isn't just like a little knockoff school just because they're despite the record, what it shows.
That was going to be my next question. Do you think any less of Indiana, being that the game was this close, or do you still kind of have the same feelings on them?
I don't necessarily think so because I think regardless whatever conference you're in, there's always going like every school it seems like has that one game that's like really like how was this team able to compete with you guys? At the end of the year, you kind of every team kind of has that game, and as long as you come out on top, that's what matters the most. So no, not really. And for Indiana to have a game like that against Penn State, I mean, yeah, it doesn't really affect my thought process on them. So they came out and won a hard, gritty game. So, and that's exactly what counts in November, right? So,
Yeah, there's something to be said about winning that style of game too. Being behind, it looks like you're about to get, upset. At Penn State, tough place to play. I think Penn State was fighting for a lot of pride there. They obviously, in terms of talent, have the talent to compete with anybody. They just haven't been. And yeah, I don't think any less of Indiana. If anything, I think more of Indiana, and I think more of Mendoza. I think Mendoza may have won himself the Heisman with that game. And another guy to come out of that game was Becker. I don't know if his first name is Carson, but whatever, last name Becker. I think it is Carson Becker. If you're watching the game, he only had like five catches the entire season. Today he had seven, or yesterday he had seven receptions for 118 yards, and he was making some tough catches. So I would say right now, Mendoza's my Heisman favorite. But that last drive, championship drive for Indiana, I kind of thought they were legit anyway to this point. But there's been some talk: should they drop in the ranking behind A&M? I do think that is an interesting conversation to be had, just because if you look at the resumes. But my personal opinion is no. Like I don't think you drop Indiana for barely beating Penn State. Like these road games are tough. So that's kind of my thoughts on the game.
yeah. And I'd like to point out probably the number one wide receiver for Indiana was out, Surratt, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So,
Mm.
which probably allowed Becker to have such a big game. And so whenever your number one guy is out, who can step up, and Mendoza made that connection, and that's really good. That's good for Signetti to know that too. Whenever they get down to crunch time, that they have another guy that they can count on, because they will. Because the later in the season gets, and in the playoffs, you're going to probably deal with more situations like that will come down to the wire. So,
Yep, agreed. So let's move on now to. I actually want to go ahead and discuss the BYU Texas Tech game. This is where game day was. High spread on this game. I think it closed at 10.5.
mhm.
Pretty big favorite Texas Tech was, and I was wondering, is BYU going to be able to keep this close? Are you surprised that the score was kind of as lopsided as it was, or was this about maybe what you were expecting?
So I think both of us, if I'm not mistaken, we both picked Texas Tech to cover
Yes.
the spread. I just think that BYU relies, and there's nothing wrong with this by any means. I think they rely a lot on the run game, and that's what Texas Tech's defense does spectacularly, is defend against the run. And so I kind of had faith in Texas Tech's defense more so than I did BYU's running offense. Um, and listen, Texas Tech was able to run the ball really effectively. So I thought that maybe BYU would have like made it a little bit more interesting, but I mean, I know we both picked like maybe 10 points, but maybe it was going to be more like a 30-20 game, not necessarily almost pretty much a 30-7 game. I wasn't necessarily expecting that. However, I did think this was a good quality win for Texas Tech. And this kind of proves our point that, or not proves, but because anything can happen in the next couple weeks. But you and I are both kind of on the same train as Texas Tech's probably going to be that team that comes out of the Big 12 that's pretty dangerous in the playoff. So anyway, it was a good overall win for Texas Tech. First time game day has been there since 2008 when they beat us, that notoriously horrible catch by Michael Crabtree. And they kept showing that crap on Saturday, and it hurt and burned every time. So anyway, I'm glad that now we can move past that moment. So um, yeah. Anyway, I thought it was a really interesting game. Really interesting. Honestly, their linebacker and their defensive lineman. I forgot the guy's name uh, for the defensive lineman, but it was pretty impressive, to be honest. They definitely have a defense that could go out there and compete with anybody. So.
I think that's what I'm most curious to see is because it looks like Tech is going to almost certainly make the playoff now.
Mhm.
And I mean, they're probably going to face BYU again. We'll see what BYU does, but it just doesn't seem like BYU is going to be able to compete with a team like Tech. At least that's what I think. So here's the question, though. BYU was number 8, I believe. Maybe they were number
Mm.
7. They have fallen
Seven.
to they've fallen to number 12,
Mm.
which isn't that far of a drop.
Yeah.
And we still have a little bit more of the regular season to go. I'm kind of curious to see what happens in the Big Ten because, Utah, number 15. This is the AP poll, by the way. We'll see what the college committee does. I kind of think it's looking like in the ACC and Big 12, they're going to drop these teams a little bit more than if an SEC team or Big 10 team loses. But that was still a top 10 team that BYU lost to. I'm curious to see Texas Tech when they go against some of these playoff teams if their defense holds up as well. Because so far it has been super impressive. And BYU not able to do anything. I'm looking at this. Their running back had 35 yards, 35 rushing yards. Like, that's not going to cut it. They just never really seemed like it just seemed like a top tier team versus a team that is not in the top 25. And a lot of what are called like the SP plus rankings that try to like really rate these teams. BYU is oftentimes not even in the top 25. So I'm curious to see if BYU wins out, if they can compete again with Texas Tech. But otherwise, I just don't really think they should be in the playoff. But I'm curious to see what happens if that is a two bid conference. But I guess that remains to be seen. regardless, I'm very impressed with Tech. Don't forget their one loss is when their quarterback was hurt, so I think that's
Yeah,
worth mentioning. But I'm
yeah,
very curious. Tech is legit, but I'm curious to see how they would do against a team kind of outside the Big 12 because let's face it, it's just kind of a weaker conference. But you got to give them credit for what they've done so far.
yeah, true. I would like to say with the BYU running back situation, they have a really good running back. I forgot his name. He just was coming kind of off of a shoulder injury. And so I don't really know like how like what percentage he was able to play, like as far as was he 80% ready to play or, whatever the deal is, which definitely is a factor going into this game because that's what BYU relies on. And plus also that's what Texas Tech's defense does the best. So in a sense, that running back needed to have his best game. And I think health was probably a big reason why he only had the 35 yards. And I don't know. Texas Tech's defense just kind of swallowed them up. I think it'll be very interesting to see who Texas Tech has to play the first match because, like you said, like Big 12 is, and I know we just came out of there a couple of years ago now, but I guess you do like question how good is that defense truly, because it's not like the Big 12 is. It's not like you think about a Big 12 school and think, holy crap, man, that offensive line is grueling. They're going to be able to pound and ground. And then, their defensive line may be fantastic, but what of their offensive line in a sense? Have they really been tested in a sense?
Sure, definitely. So that's going to be a fun team to watch, Texas Tech. Let's see. The next game, I don't know how much you had to watch this game. It was on my screen. I was watching it, but once I saw it wasn't going to be as competitive, it kind of went into the background. I would say a lot of these teams, and this is an example, but I noticed this week it seems like the teams you're starting to really see the separation. The really good teams are starting to play maybe their best ball right now, and you've been yet to kind of see that from Georgia. And Georgia, I would say in this game, really looked like Georgia. They had the initial scare. Mississippi State moves the ball pretty well, like the first drive to go up 7-0. And then from there, Georgia kind of took over. And I think that's very impressive to do at Mississippi State, a team that has been playing very well and competitive in all their games. And Georgia was able to kind of flip the script. Everyone thought this was going to be, it was a 7.5 point spread. A lot of people thought Mississippi State was going to cover. And instead, Georgia just looked like the, vastly superior team. Very impressed running the ball. Their running back had 181 yards on 12 carries. If you're Georgia, you're happy to see that. Defense can still maybe be a little shaky, but I think this is a big win for them heading into obviously next week, what is going to be a big game against Texas. And I think this is good just for their confidence as well to get a win like this. And if they do beat Texas, it feels like, I mean, look, Georgia's number 5 right now, but it does kind of feel like it's weird to say, but Georgia's back in that elite group after they've kind of had some questions. So just, I would say this is another example. We've got a few more examples of teams showing their separation. Who are the top teams in the SEC? Got to put Georgia in that category right now. That's kind of all I have to say about the game. I don't know if you have anything on it.
Well, Georgia's putting together their last several games. Their offense has been very good. The offense is just starting to click, which is not good for us because we face them this coming weekend. It'll be very interesting to see how we do against them. And listen, honestly, this game, like several people like reference this could be like an upset alert. This game, the Mississippi State Georgia game, just because Mississippi State has been very competitive throughout the season. I know their record is 5-5, but no matter what, for the most part, they've been very competitive and taken a lot of their games down to the wire. So I didn't. I expected Georgia to pull this out for sure, but not necessarily like beat the crap out of them like they did. So I thought that's a really good win for Georgia, especially in confidence purposes, like you're saying, because by no means is Mississippi State a pushover team. Good quality win for them, and it could make it scary too. Because it's like I guess it would be Alabama and A&M SEC championship. right now.
For now, yeah, I don't think there's
So
much of a case for Georgia to be in the
hmm,
SEC championship just because
be
they'll
very
have the
interesting.
tie-breaking
Like, man, it's
loss
kind of
to
crazy to like the
Alabama. If
top.
A&M loses, I believe Ole Miss gets the tiebreaker. I'd have to look again, but
Yeah,
Georgia, I think, actually has the toughest road to be in the SEC championship, which is kind of good for them because that means they probably get the playoff home game. I think they're fine with that. Whatever, but yeah, Georgia's going to be fun to watch. I've been curious to see if they can return to that, get to that next level. Everyone's kind of described them as a high floor team, but maybe their ceiling isn't as high. And
hmm
it would be curious to see if they could turn that around. I don't know. I mean, it's not like Mississippi State's the greatest team in the world, but we know how competitive they've been. And
yep,
obviously, Texas is going to be an interesting test for them this week. So
yeah, and we could get to that like this upcoming week or whatever. But Texas, it's very interesting for them too because what do you do with them if they're able to win out? Which that'd be extremely hard. But I mean, they've been kind of putting things together, so I think that is a potential thing that could happen. Will it happen? I have no idea. But anyway, the SEC is going to be a very interesting conference to watch over the next couple weeks because some of these teams very well could lose a game that we expect them not to, right? And then it just messes everything up. Which I know we were talking earlier about the ACC. Um, so anyway, interesting storylines are about to come up in the SEC for sure.
well, speaking of interesting storylines, Texas A&M, people keep saying that all these games are going to be competitive and it's going to be a close one in LSU. Maybe they lose to LSU. Maybe Missouri can beat A&M. No one's beating A&M right now. A&M keeps running away from their opponents, winning pretty handily, and they're 9-0. Best start since 1992. Is probably their best start really ever because now they're in the SEC. It means more. And now, if they win out, it looks very likely they're going to have a great shot to win out. They're not losing to South Carolina this upcoming week. And then they have Samford, obviously at Texas. No matter if Texas loses to Georgia or not, that is going to be a big game. But it is pretty impressive what A&M has been able to do to be undefeated at this point, to go on the road 3 straight weeks, win like they have. This game, we were talking about it earlier. Missouri kind of annoyed me with, if I were a neutral, I'd be more annoyed with kind of their game plan. I understand their quarterback clearly they thought was very limited, but at some point you have to take the risk with him. And it just never felt like they did that until it was like maybe too late. And they were just content on running the ball. One thing I'll say is, yeah, if you look at the box score, you see both running backs had 100 yards, and A&M still does struggle to contain the run a bit. I will say that's a little deceiving because a lot of those yards, especially by Hardy, was kind of at the end of the game in somewhat garbage time. But I'll also say it's deceiving because that's all Missouri did. I mean, they didn't really try to pass the ball that much. I mean, I'm looking, Zollers, he had 22 attempts, but I think a lot of that came in like the fourth quarter. I remember they were down 21 and they're still trying to run the ball. And that may work one drive. I just don't know if you're going to be able to come back on A&M just running the ball. And when you're one dimensional like that, A&M's defense is good against teams that are one dimensional. So, yeah, Missouri, obviously, they prove they can run the ball. They got to figure out the quarterback situation. Maybe they're just done. But yeah, 7 for 22. That's not good for Matt Zollers. And
I
for
think their
A&M,
backup, their backups are like walk-ons, if I'm not mistaken.
that is
So behind
interesting.
Zollers,
And
so it's
as I
almost kind of
was
like, ugh.
as I was telling you, like they have the best scouting report on their own guys. Like I'm sure they saw in practice, okay, this guy cannot throw the ball.
Yeah,
But I don't know. I just feel like you had to at some point try, and then when you tried, the game was away from you. The
yeah,
one thing I'll also say, Missouri's defense is legit. Credit to A&M for putting up 38. I will say the way they put up 38 had a little something to do with the defense and Missouri's lack of offense. At the end of the day, though, A&M was able to run the ball for like over 100 yards in the second half alone. So credit to them. But Missouri's defense is legit. Impressive win for A&M, and we'll see what they do from this point. But anyway, that's my thoughts on the game. You got anything on this one?
I mean, honestly, I wouldn't need to say like too much more than what you already did. I think that this game could have been a little bit more interesting, like you said, if they had committed to the passing game a little bit more as far as Missouri goes, just because honestly it was pretty limited. And as you can see, like, I don't know, they probably just didn't put together the best passing plays together for Zollers. 7 of 22, like you said, for 77 yards. Like, surely they could have come up with a better game plan. And like I said, I think your guys' defense is good. However, it's not like Missouri doesn't have some weapons that they could use to, I don't know, just relieve some of the pressure off the run game. And if they did that, I mean, it could have at least been a little bit more competitive, in my opinion. So, anyway, but it was good. Good win for you guys. Missouri's got a really good defense. So, yeah, that's all I have to really say.
Okay, the other game that was on at 2:30 that was the big game was Oregon against Iowa. We were talking about how great this game was going to be. It was a great game. Being that this was going on at the same time with A&M, I was watching it. I saw it. It sounds like you maybe had a better feel for this game, read on this game. So, I'll let you start. What were your just thoughts on it? Yeah, go for it.
Well, I will say that this is, which I actually just got an email about this too. Forgot to discuss that with you prior to getting on here. But so this game was on CBS, so I could have watched this on YouTube TV. The uh, A&M and Missouri game was on ABC, so I had to watch that on ESPN Plus, which I had that on the TV for a little bit and watched the Oregon game on the iPad, and then kind of reversed those two once I kind of saw the writing on the wall for the A&M Missouri game. This game was fantastic. Me and you both were talking about it. Like, this has the makings for an Iowa upset being played in Iowa, and then in game day, they reported that it was going to be really windy and really rainy, cold, kind of the makings of like a classic Big Ten game. And it just made me even more excited. And really and truly, this game was very close and very pretty much throughout, And at one point, I was kind of thinking, like, okay, is this maybe where Oregon starts pulling away? But Iowa
Yeah.
came together and kept it very competitive. And honestly, like I was saying before we got on this phone call, or when we got on this video chat, whatever, um, literally Iowa, after they scored their touchdown, only inches away from being able to like convert and get that 2 point conversion, which would have basically Oregon would have had to go get a touchdown to win the game or tie it with a field goal, and who knows what could have happened. Anyway, it was just one of those like grimy, gritty game, like Big Ten games, which is why like those are the best Big Ten games in my opinion. Are those like really hard fought, bad weather? The only thing that could have made this game better, in my opinion, was like if it was really snowing, like so much snow on the field, and I don't know, a crazy game in my opinion. It honestly probably one of my favorite games to have watched like throughout the season so far. But honestly, you have to give Dante Moore some credit. Definitely a hostile environment, very hard game. Um, was it his best game? No, but like I don't know if you were able to see the last drive, but he led Oregon very well against that
Yep.
Iowa defense to get them in position for that field goal. And honestly, one of the prettiest throws I've seen this year, where he just literally teardrop it in to the wide receiver, and I don't know, it was awesome. So awesome game. It's a shame that Iowa like if they could just have like a quarterback that they could have just a decent enough pass game, man, I think this Iowa team could be pretty dangerous, to be honest with you. And it'll be interesting to see if they go in the portal this upcoming year and see what they try to do at the quarterback position. Because if they did, they're both their running backs were running pretty well against this Oregon defense, which I forgot what they ranked, but they're top five in run defense, if I'm not mistaken. So, and they were kind of their offensive line was just kind of bullying them. So it was a good game. And I know that was a little challenging for you to watch because it was the same time as the A&M Missouri game. But I guess how much were you able to watch and what were your thoughts on it?
I mean, I was able to watch the majority of it. There were times I looked over and I was like, "Whoa, I was on the goal line," and I was like, "I must have missed something." But I agree with you. That last drive by Dante Moore, when they really needed it, struggling to move the ball all day, And you see that so much in NFL games where it seems like it's a defensive game, but then they get in that 2 minute drill, they're able to pull it off. Also,
Yeah.
credit to that receiver for making the catch he made for that
Yeah.
pass you're talking
Yeah, that
about.
was hard. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if that play doesn't happen, there's a good chance Iowa just wins the game. I mean, we don't know. We don't know. But it did seem like that was kind of like they needed that to happen. And I feel for Iowa. I think they played so well. I think they played as well as they could in that situation versus a
Yeah.
great team like that.
Yeah.
And, this week they have USC at USC. That's a fascinating game. And I hope it's still a top 25 matchup. I hope they remain in the top 25. I don't feel good for USC in that game because I think USC's offense is great, but they struggled against that Nebraska defense the other week, and Iowa's defense is legit. And of course, the question is always going to be, can Iowa put up points? But we can get into that later. I do feel for Iowa; they win this game. They're in the playoff hunt, but now they'd have a very hard time. Regardless, it's been a very good season for them and a very good turnaround. I remember watching them earlier in the season thinking, wow, this team is bad. But look, two of their losses are Indiana and Oregon, and they lost by a combined 7 points.
Right.
So, worth mentioning, worth mentioning. So,
For sure.
feel for them.
Just
Go ahead.
I think their coach is like so like underrated, to be honest with you, because Iowa never has like just top tier talent, but yet they're honestly pretty relevant, almost pretty like every year. And when I mean relevant, it's not like they're always in the top 10 or anything, but they're always hovering, like being in the top half of the Big Ten, which is pretty hard to do, considering all the other schools which do get top tier talent in. So, and actually, he's the winningest Big Ten coach in history, I believe it is. And it doesn't surprise me because the guy's been there for like freaking ever. Like I remember
Yeah, I
him.
think he's 106, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I think I remember him like when Texas played Iowa. Like, gosh, what was that? 2006, 2007. I think he was the coach then. So it's been for forever. Anyway, it was a great game. Man, if we could at least get one game like this every week, oh man, that would be awesome.
Yeah, now for Oregon, from here on out, their next big game is going to be USC. And Oregon kind of needed a win like this, not to get in the playoff. Obviously, they were going to be in the playoffs, but there were questions like, okay, the last quarter of their schedule is a little difficult. Could they fall? Is it possible they fall out of the playoffs if they lose one of these games? They're able to pull it off. It's a good quality win after, let's face it, the Penn State win isn't looking as good anymore. So now they have this win. Next game, host Minnesota. They probably got that one. Then they host USC. That could be
Yep.
fascinating. And then, this wasn't the game I was going to pivot to, but I think it's fitting. The last game of the year is at Washington, and that's a
Yeah,
team we have to talk about. I think just quickly on Oregon, it's still going to be a losable game for Oregon because Washington is one of the toughest places to play. But
it
part of
is.
me was wondering if Washington was being a little overrated after people were calling them underrated because Washington really hadn't done anything all year and they really humiliated themselves this week. And they lost to one of the worst teams, really, in the FBS this season, and that is Wisconsin.
Yeah,
It was snowing. I don't know if that's something to do with it, but there is no excuse to lose this game. And I don't know if you saw. I don't know how legitimate it is, but there's Jed Fish was. There were reports that he wants another job and that his family is not happy there.
oh wow,
I do wonder if that had anything to do with this.
it's
I
very
don't
odd.
know if he said anything about it, but that was the report prior to the game. So,
If that's
yeah.
true though, like I don't know, I find that like if it is true, it's a little ridiculous on his end. Like, why leave Arizona then at that point? Because when you were at Arizona, you had a pretty decent team. I think a 10-win season. And I don't know. I think this is his second
Well, I don't
year.
know. I mean, look, Washington is a job upgrade, and you don't know what Washington is like. 'Cause apparently, it was some sort of family thing. His family is the one that's not happy in Washington for
Mm,
whatever reason. So it could just be as simple
okay,
as
then
that.
fine. I guess you don't really know that for anywhere.
Right.
Um, To Wisconsin's credit, though, because there was some chatter about Luke Fickle or whatever his name is, the Wisconsin coach. They came out and said that he was going to be the coach through 2026. And for him to get a win like that, that kind of helps him in his corner because he's been there for like 4 years and he had a good run at Cincinnati. And then, you know, we're probably about 10 years removed away from it, I know, but Wisconsin, honestly, like through the time we were in junior high all the way up through high school, Wisconsin was like a really good team every year, you know.
Yeah.
And then now they kind of faded out. So whenever they initially hired Luke Fickle, it was like, oh, wow, okay, maybe this guy can kind of return this team back to prominence. But that hasn't happened yet. And I think Wisconsin is a hard job, maybe especially now as far as the transfer portal goes, because it's like, they may be able to throw some money around to a couple guys, but how are they going to be able to attract other people there? Because there's more desirable schools, in my opinion, in the Big Ten. So anyway, I think it's kind of a hard job. Not necessarily saying Luke Fickle sucks as a coach. I think Wisconsin's just a hard spot.
Agreed. And I don't really know how you turn that program around, to be honest,
Yeah,
but I guess that's one
you,
to
you,
watch.
I think you have to give Brett Bielema, the Illinois coach, just credit for what he was able to do at Wisconsin because it's like every single year they had a top tier running back like oh man, I forgot that. I mean, they had Melvin Gordon. I know that they had James White, I think his name was, and there was another guy that was really amazing. But anyway, you just have to give that guy credit. Anyway, um, I think we can briefly speak about this game. The LSU Alabama game, unless you had something else to say about the
No, I'm
Washington
good.
Wisconsin game. So, okay, in my opinion, and I barely watched this because I was like, okay, honestly, this I kind of see how this is going to go. Now, the first couple possessions, like LSU came out and did defended against Alabama pretty well, and then after that, I mean, this wasn't Alabama's like best offensive game by any means. Um, Somebody said it like when I was watching the Vanderbilt Auburn game, which we can get to that point here in a moment, but whenever a coach gets fired, typically that next week the team is super emotional, and I think you could kind of see that at the very beginning. I think Alabama just has too much firepower. However, their run game I think was pretty atrocious, if I'm not mistaken, just from
Yep.
like what I was looking at. Yeah, it's pretty atrocious, and honestly, I think that's going to get Alabama into trouble. Okay, because Alabama's going to have to face some teams that can defend the pass pretty well. And if Ty Simpson is not going to be able to get it done, by the way, I don't think that's like something horrible either. Like if for you to win the national championship, you can't necessarily be a one-dimensional team. And up to this point, for the most part on the offensive side, Alabama has been one-dimensional. They've had several games where they had a pretty good run game, but up to this point, if Ty Simpson wasn't doing what he was doing, Alabama would probably have not done so well this year. So anyway, that is somewhat a concern. But on the flip side of that, for LSU, that's good for them. They came out and actually played with some heart and stuff like that. And they sat Nussmeier, I think, I'm not sure what point of the game. I mean, it was towards the end, but I'm not sure how many reps that other guy got. So I'm kind of curious what Nussmeier's going to do from here on out. It kind of sucks for him because he came back and for a senior year, and it's been nothing short of a crapshoot, honestly. And I think it reflects more on the organization. Like I think there's just organizational issues for LSU, not necessarily just football.
State issues for LSU, Louisiana.
Yeah.
But yeah, the quarterback, I think his name is Van Buren. He came in
Oh,
and
Mississippi
he was
State. Yeah.
very, very dynamic.
Yeah.
The weakness on LSU is their O line. Now,
Yeah.
the good thing about this new quarterback, since he is so dynamic, he can work around that, whereas Nussmeier really can't. I am
Yeah.
curious to see what they do because at this point, they might as well just start worrying about the future, maybe get this guy some reps. But I do feel bad for Nussmeier. Like, I'm curious, what's he going to do? But yeah, I've been kind of thinking that all season about Alabama. They are very one-dimensional. They have not shown all season that they can run the ball. It has not mattered. Will it matter? I don't know, but it might matter this week. They face OU, and that's a
Yeah, that's
legit defense. I think that's
oh
going
yeah,
to be a maybe much more fascinating game than people realize,
yeah,
just because of Alabama's one dimensionality. So we'll see. It's going to be a fascinating one to watch. Don't forget, Oklahoma is playing for everything. They're playing for everything. They really can't afford to lose another game. And Alabama's still kind of going through this gauntlet. Auburn at the end of the year now, you kind of wonder how that team's going to be because all of a sudden they can score, which is insane. They did the anti-Hugh Freeze where they could score a bunch of points, but then they couldn't stop anybody. I don't know what happened against Vandy. Like it looked like it was going to be perfect against Vandy. Kind of transitioning to that game now because once
yeah,
Auburn could score, it just seemed like oh well that's going to be it for Vandy because it's a bad matchup for Vandy
yeah.
for the
Then
same reasons it was
Diego
bad against
Pavia
Texas.
came alive. Yeah,
Right, right. And so credit to Vandy for being able to win that way. But for Auburn, I mean, it sucks for them. They just can't win the game even whenever they find their offense. But back to Bama real quick. At Auburn, end of the season, watch out. Those games are always crazy. You never know. You never know,
oh yeah,
especially
for
if
sure.
Auburn can figure it
Listen, what's crazy to me is Vandy's defense is not bad at all, right? Pretty much for until now, they have rode Jackson Arnold at quarterback, right? Literally, the guy, their backup starts, goes out and throws for 353 yards. And it's like, why?
out. Yeah.
I mean, seriously, how is this possible? Like, Jackson Arnold, probably they had to pay some NIL money, get him there, 5-star recruit, but he has not panned out. Okay. He has not panned out now at 2 schools. And I don't know how much you can blame that on him, play calling, whatever the case may be. I don't want to, say anything like that. But interesting, I don't know, interesting story there, I guess you could say. Like, and same thing for them, like we were talking about the LSU game. They came out, showed heart, nearly beat Vandy, which is a great team. Credit to Diego Pavia for what he was able to do. I believe over 300 passing yards, 100 rushing yards. And I want to say this was at Auburn, right? I
No.
want to say, oh, is
No,
that
at Vandy.
Vandy?
Yep.
Oh, wow. Okay. At Vandy. So let me ask you this question. So if Vandy wins out, do you think they deserve to be in the playoff? Their next 2 games are Kentucky and then at Tennessee. And they're ranked 16 right now. So, I mean, I think at this point, they would need some help from the other teams, right? But
Yeah, I agree. It depends on what the other teams do,
yeah,
but yeah, it just depends because the ACC, and this is what we'll talk about in a minute, they're having a lot of trouble right now. So they may only get one team. The Big 12, funny enough, the way it's kind of looking, all of a sudden has like a shot. It's a small shot, but a small shot at like 3 teams, but they may just get one team depending on what happens. So in that case, yeah, it depends on like what Texas and OU do. If Texas loses, then they'll probably choose Vandy over Texas, and then same thing with OU.
and there's some
I think
chatter right now too about Texas potentially
as a
being able
three
to even get
loss.
in with a third loss.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the thing. But if Vandy wins out and they have 2 losses, and let's just say Texas ends up having 3 losses, Texas has a head to head, but also Vandy has less losses. That's going to be a big discussion.
Yeah,
So I don't know. I don't know.
it'll be very
I
dramatic.
think probably so. I think they probably do make it if they win out. That'd be my guess.
Yeah, I think they could somewhat be. I mean, I think it just depends on who they play first, if they could be competitive or not. But it would be a great storyline, though, I think, right? Because I keep calling them a Cinderella team. They're not really like a Cinderella team per se, but just the storylines that they've been able to procure throughout the year, I think it'd be pretty awesome to have them in the playoff. Um, Especially, I don't know, just Diego Pavia, I don't know. It'd be pretty cool. But we can segue into the ACC now. Now, I will say I forgot who Miami played, but I noticed it was almost halftime, and Miami was like barely beating the team they played, which was a nobody. And I was like, holy crap, dude. this team is like going off the rails.
Well, they ended up pulling away.
Yeah, they
I
did. I
believe,
saw that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't know if anyone wants to win the ACC. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen. You could almost make an argument that they shouldn't get any bids. They're going to get at least a bid. It's going to be weird the way they do the ranking. So you have five teams with one loss, and this is within the conference, and that's Georgia Tech, Virginia, Pittsburgh, SMU, Duke. Coming into today, Virginia was undefeated within the conference, and Louisville had one loss. Louisville looked like they had a great shot to be in that title game. They had the best shot to make the playoff. They just needed to not lose, and then they lose to Cal. And the thing is, you have Duke, who lost this week. They are overall 5-4, but
Still 4-1
three of
though.
their losses are out of conference, so they still
Yeah.
have a shot to win it.
There's one, two, three,
Now they face Virginia this
five
week.
teams with one loss on the uh,
Yeah,
conference schedule. Yeah.
right. So now Virginia faces Duke this week. So whoever wins that game and whoever loses it is kind of out. SMU, I think, has a good shot. Pitt now kind of looks like they may be the best team in the ACC, and of course you still have Georgia Tech. They only have the one loss. So I don't know what's going to happen here, but to me, the most fascinating team still might be Miami because Miami doesn't really have a shot to be in the ACC championship game. But how are they going to rank Miami? Because if all these other teams that were on top of the ACC fall, well, just according
Yeah.
to the
Right.
rankings, Miami's next in line, and you don't want to end up in a situation where all of a sudden you have two ACC teams. Because I'm sorry, like I just don't think you can do that. This league just does not look good right now. So I think you just have to choose the winner of the league and the winner only.
Yeah, just because both. I mean, this year there's just really not like a clear cut definitive like team you could really see as a threat in the playoff. And listen, there's a couple teams to have that argument in the Big Ten and the SEC. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm
If
still going
Georgia
for
Tech
Georgia.
can win out, they still have Pitt,
Yeah,
which
at
is a good
least,
team,
yeah,
and they
right.
have Georgia. So I
Yeah,
think that's just a big test for them. If they can compete with Georgia, win out, be in the ACC title game, and then win, I still think they're a good team. But
oh
outside of
yeah. I mean,
that,
if they went out and beat Georgia, and then beat whoever in the ACC title game, I think for sure they definitely deserve to be in the playoff. It's just the team behind them. What happens to them? I think that's the next question. But
yeah.
that will be very hard for Georgia Tech to go in there and do. Actually, I'm not sure. Is that Georgia Tech? Georgia. Oh, they play Georgia at home.
Yeah. No, I mean that's going to be interesting. I mean,
Yeah,
I
for
think it'll be
sure.
a close game no matter what, as it was last year. So,
Oh
to
yeah.
me, the most fascinating team in the conference to watch is going to be Pittsburgh. They have been impressive, at least these last several games. As I'm looking at it now, they kind of lost to Louisville and then at West Virginia, but they face Notre Dame this week. I would expect Notre Dame to win, but can Pitt be competitive? And then they have at Georgia Tech, and then they host Miami. So that's going to be a pretty good litmus test for them to see if they are worth anything. But
Well, let me
I am.
ask you this. Yeah, let me ask you this. So up to this point, we both have liked Notre Dame. I still do. But do you? Yes, you could say that it's very impressive for them to have like only lost by 1 point to you guys. But that loss against Miami, how do you view that now, knowing weeks ahead of where we were at the time? Does that Miami loss by 3 points? How do we view that? Because at the time we were like, holy crap, Miami's like, I think they got up to like number 2 or number 3 or something like that. And now they're all the way back at 18, and potentially the season is like getting derailed. So I just wanted to ask your thoughts on Notre Dame because really and truly, like their schedule, relatively weak. They played Miami, yes, good team. Tech A&M, good team, yes, and then USC, and then everybody else pretty much after that. I don't know if you can even if you can have the argument. Yes, they do play Pitt, but are they only 7-2 and ranked 24 just because of the conference they're in? Or anyway, what's your thoughts on that? I guess.
Well, I think the only reason you're saying that is you're worried Notre Dame's going to get in above Texas, and Texas is going to be the first team out. But
Listen, right now we would. we would definitely deserve to get in over them because right now we have two.
Oh, that's ridiculous. That is absolutely
We do.
ridiculous.
No,
I
it's
was
not.
joking, but that is ridiculous. Let me just get back to that because that's going to be a discussion, but just hang on. As far as the Miami loss, no, I don't view it a lot differently because Miami was legitimately playing good. Don't forget, it's not like
That's
that was
true.
the only game Miami played. They had beat USF, which is a good team. They had who else did they face? Florida, when Florida was still fighting their hardest, and Miami had somebody else too, right? I'd have to look at the schedule, but I'm looking at Notre Dame's schedule, and the thing is, and this is kind of what I like the committee what they're doing is you have to use the eye test, and they were competitive. Don't forget that game was at Miami, and don't forget Alabama lost to Florida State the first game of the year too. There is something about the first game of the year, the first few games of the year, where yes, the wins and losses should count, but let's face it, you have to weight them, I think, a little bit differently, just a little bit, but a little bit differently. They've gone through their schedule. They're blowing out opponents. USC, that win is looking better and better. And I mean, we'll see what USC does. Navy was a team that was right on the edge of the top 25, blow them out 49-10. Their offense has been unstoppable. They've been figuring out defensively. It's not the strongest schedule in the world, but like at the end of the day, they're going to be 10-2. If you watch them play, you can tell they're one of the best teams in the country. At Pitt, who has been impressive this week, they win that game. They're going to win out. Do I wish they'd get in a conference so we wouldn't have to have this conversation with them every year? Yes, but oh well. By the way, Arkansas, I just have to say, I do think this is impressive to go at Arkansas and hold that team to 13 points. Nobody has done that.
That's true. Yeah, I forgot
So,
about. Yeah, that's true. That
so
one is impressive. I mean, and they would fit right
yeah.
in with the Big Ten, in my opinion, just with their style
Oh
of
yeah,
play and everything like that. And I love their coach. Listen, I'm not saying that Notre Dame doesn't necessarily deserve to not be in the playoff. I just wish they would get into a conference and just play, I guess, better all around, more games,
yeah,
all around
sure.
more, just better opponents throughout the year.
For sure, for sure.
And I
And they're
guess you could say in their circumstance, I guess credit to them because I'm not really sure how they do their schedules, but they with them not being in a conference, it is probably hard for them to get some top teams. Maybe I don't really know, but um, playing Miami, playing you guys, and then
USC.
doing Arkansas. Yeah, USC, which that's like the rivalry game, which they need to keep that for sure. But anyway,
Well, listen, as far as them being in over you guys, I mean, they are in over you guys right now. So you're basically making the case that, I mean, right now you think Texas should be in the playoffs. I,
uh, I'm
that's what
just
you
saying
just said.
between the
You
two.
just said
I'm
that.
saying between the two of us, then yes.
Well, so then you're saying, if you're saying Texas shouldn't be in the playoffs, then you're saying Notre Dame shouldn't be in the playoffs. You just contradicted
I think
yourself.
I'm not saying one way or another yet for Texas until the end of the year. Like this next month will really tell everyone. I think
Okay,
what.
of course, that's true. We're talking
Okay,
about right
okay,
now.
but with Texas, our offense has been so up and down. Though it's hard. Like if Arch is able to be consistently as good as he was in the Vandy game, then hey, I mean Arch
Okay,
is like
yes.
made
If
big
Texas
improvement.
plays at a championship level, then they're going to
No,
win the championship. I'm
no,
talking
that's
about right now.
no. You know what I
Right
mean?
now. You just said it. You said that Texas should be in over Notre Dame right now. That's all I'm asking.
Yes,
Okay. Based on what?
Vandy win, OU win, and
Okay, you have a
the
loss to an unranked Florida,
okay,
and
I get that. Yes, but how many how many ranked wins does Notre Dame have? I think it was against USC, who at the time was ranked like 24 or something. I don't know off the top of my head what they're ranked now, but that's
USC,
like
they're
really
19 now.
they what?
They're 19 now, and again, you cannot just use metrics. You have to like
I,
look
I,
at.
I
You have to use
yeah,
the
I
eye
get it.
test. You have to use the eye
Listen,
test.
I love their running back. I love their
Jeremiah
running
Love,
backs, both of them, and I love their coach. It's not like I'm a Notre Dame hater.
their
I'm just saying
quarterback is great. CJ Carr has been excellent.
Yes, for a first year starter, he has.
Not for a first year starter, he's been great. He's been
Well, I'm saying especially for a first year starter.
yeah. Well, here's the thing. Nobody, I don't think really many people would agree with you because I think just about everybody thinks Notre Dame is one of the best teams in the nation despite their two losses, and I don't think anyone thinks that about Texas. Is there potential for Texas? Yeah, they have Georgia and A&M left. They could just win out, like you said, and none of this matters. To this point, they beat Vandy, deserve credit for that. But you have to pay attention to the fact that their loss is versus an unranked team, Florida, and that they
Yes.
really struggled against Kentucky and Mississippi State, which are two bottom teams in the SEC. It wasn't until they beat Vandy the way they did that people were like, oh, okay, maybe Texas is figuring something out. And I just, by the way, that's just a good matchup for Texas, but they did it. It was a top 10 team. They won. So I just don't know if I agree with you. Like right now, ranking, you're saying that Texas should be ranked ahead of Notre Dame. I don't know if
If
you
it
use the
came
eye
down to
test. Notre Dame is a
who
much
like
more
a 12th
impressive team.
spot or whatever, who would get it between Notre Dame and Texas, I think up to this point, like right now, you'd have to give it to Texas. Just because what the resume says, and then yes, Notre Dame has been pretty good, but despite our schedule, we're still 7-2. One of the loss being yes against unranked, but the other loss was against Ohio State, which we made that game competitive at the very end. I get it may not have looked competitive the entire game, but we only lost by a touchdown to them. I don't know how many teams can do that. Not many, based off so far what Ohio State has done to pretty much everybody. So, pretty much for the
If
year,
you want to compare resumes, then Notre Dame still has the better resume. You have a you have a loss to an unranked team. Notre Dame lost by 1 point to the number three team, and then 3 points at Miami, which is still a ranked loss. And then they've won now however many straight, and they have a ranked win against USC. So I mean,
one win versus a ranked team, which was I believe 24 at the time, or they were in the 20s or something like that.
yeah. So anyway, we just disagree on that. We could probably argue for that for 30 minutes.
Yeah,
Um,
yes, we probably could.
Okay, so is there anything else in terms of what happened last week that you want to discuss, or do you think we covered it?
Mm, honestly, I
And
think
Notre
we
Dame
pretty much.
blowing out Navy. Speaking of ranked wins and losses, they blow them out. Navy was just ranked last week, but we only want to,
Yes,
count
but
it if they're actually ranked at the time. I guess we don't want to,
oh my gosh.
use our judgment. Okay, that's pretty much all I got in terms of this week. I think next week is going to be very exciting. We have some
Oh,
big
for sure.
games: Texas, Georgia, OU, Alabama, USC, Iowa, and I think I'm leaving something out too. So that's going to be very exciting. I'm looking forward to it. Do you think game day announced they're going to be at Texas, Georgia yet? Do you think they'll go there?
Mm, I don't think so. I don't think they've announced where they're going yet. I mean, to me, I think that would be like, where else would they go? Like, I guess you can maybe
Notre Dame,
say,
Pitt. That's not going to be the choice. Iowa, USC, OU, Alabama, and then Texas, Georgia is the last one. So I think it would
I
be
think it
Texas.
would probably have to go Texas, Georgia, just because I believe that, because I think we're almost on the fringe of like do or die here, like we really are, for us to for sure be in the playoff, we just need to win every single game. So there is a lot of the line for for Texas, but also I mean Georgia would be 8-2, and who's to say they would be able to make the uh, SEC championship? I mean they'd still probably be able to make the playoff, but I don't know. I think there's a lot on the line for both teams. I guess. Yeah,
If
I'd probably
Texas
say
wins this game, they're
yeah,
probably in the playoff. You
yeah.
know,
Well,
so
just because, like we said, Georgia is they're 8-1. Okay, their offense has been coming alive, and that's been well. Their defense hasn't been the best, but also their offense didn't look the best early in the year either. It's kind of like chess moves won the game there. So I'll be interested to see because Texas's offense, as per the conversation we had before, Arch has been kind of coming alive and doing better. And also, I think the offensive line rotation that we have now has proven to be a little bit better than what it has earlier in the year. So, anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the preview game. But yeah, I would be kind of surprised if Texas Georgia didn't have game day there because I guess they had it at Ohio State in the Texas game, but maybe that's why they would choose not to do another Texas game. I guess I don't know, but how could you
Yeah, if
not?
they
And
just
it
wanted to
looks
go
like
somewhere
Georgia.
different.
Yeah.
No, no, they have announced it, and I kind of like they're doing that. I like what they're doing
Oh my
because
gosh.
it's somewhere different. Notre Dame at Pitt. I kind of like that actually, even though it's not the biggest game. It's still a big game, and you're not going to get to go to that atmosphere very much. And they probably will
Well,
go
that's
to A&M Texas at the end of the year.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Got to keep that in mind.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I
okay,
think
well,
this upcoming week's
go
pretty
ahead.
interesting for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's pretty much all I got. It's been another episode of Blown Coverage. Caleb, I will talk to you next time.
All right, next time.